Welcome back to True Crime Chronicles. The podcast will be exposed to the psychology, the history, and the human stories behind some of the world's most disturbing crimes, always with respect for the victims and without making things too violent. I'm your host, Sherelle, and today's episode focuses on one of the most infamous criminal cases in British history, Rosemary West. Her name is often paired with her husband, Fred West, but Rose was not a passive participant. She was an active, willing partner, and in many ways, the driving force behind some of the most horrifying acts committed inside 25 Cromwell Street. This episode will explore Rose's early life, her relationship with Fred, the dynamics that shaped their crimes, and the long-lasting impact on the victims, families, and the community. No graphic details, just the truth, the psychology, and the lessons we can learn. Let's begin, you guys. To understand Rose West, we have to start with her childhood, a childhood marked by instability, dysfunction, and trauma. Rosemary Letts was born in 1953 in Devon, England. Her father, Bill Letts, struggled with severe mental health issues and was known for violent, controlling behavior. Her mother, Daisy, faced her own challenges, including depression and the strain of raising multiple children under difficult circumstances. Rose grew up in an environment where boundaries were blurred, emotions were suppressed, and control was enforced through fear. Children who grew up in chaotic homes often develop coping mechanisms, but in Rose's case, those mechanisms twisted into something darker. By her early teens, Rose was already showing signs of troubling behavior, aggression, manipulation, and lack of empathy. She struggled in school, drifted socially, and gravitated toward older men. This is where her path crossed with Fred West. So I do want to say, if you take a look at Rose West's early life, we can see that she did not have the perfect life. We can see she had two parents who had mental health issues that were struggling. And we can see that because of the environment she grew up in, where there were no boundaries, everything was blurred, emotions had to be suppressed, and she had to basically grow up in that type of environment that was very chaotic. So as they stated, Rose ended up, having troubling behavior. She lacked empathy. She had a lot of aggression, and I think anyone who grew up in a home like her would be that exact way, because you're not going to be able to show emotions or to not be angry or irritable or any kind of thing that we would think, especially if you grew up in her environment. So I can kind of see why her childhood ended up being the way that it was, in a sense, and why she probably went straight into survival mode. Rose met Fred West when she was just 15 years old. Fred was significantly older, already married, and already showing violent tendencies, but Rose was drawn to him, not in spite of his darkness, but because of it. Their relationship formed quickly. Fred saw Rose as someone he could mold, someone who shared his impulses. Rose saw Fred as someone who validated her own emerging cruelty and gave her a sense of power she had never experienced. Within a short time, Rose moved in with Fred and took on a parental role to his children from previous relationships. But instead of providing care, she became increasingly abusive and controlling. This is the beginning of a partnership that would evolve into one of the most notorious criminal duos in modern history. So let's look at this. She's 15 years old and she meets this older man, which I find extremely sick because he's way older than her, and he ends up developing a relationship with a 15-year-old kid. And I hate to say where are her parents, because I know they had their issues, but this is just sick, straight up sick. A 15-year-old girl dating an older man, then moving in with him. And it was stated that he was already married and he had kids. And then she's in there trying to raise his kids and control them and mistreat his kids at 15 years old. Like, what is really happening and going on in these type of situations? So yes, this is a really, really twisted and sick story, you guys. I don't understand any of it. I don't understand how a 15-year-old girl comes to meet a grown man. I know this happens every day, but it's still sick and twisted. And she's getting caught up in his stuff, and he's allowing her. And then the whole situation with her controlling his kids is just it's too much. She's way too young for this. But when people hear the name Rose West, they often think of one place, 25 Cromwell Street, a seemingly ordinary home in Gloucester that hid years of abuse, manipulation, and violence. Fred and Rose created an environment where they controlled every aspect of the household. They isolated their victims, manipulated them, and used fear as a tool. Rose, in particular, was known for her ability to switch between charm and cruelty with unsettling ease. Neighbors noticed strange behavior, arguments, disappearances, odd construction projects, but the Wests maintained a facade of normalcy. They blended into the community just enough to avoid suspicion. Their ability to appear ordinary while committing extraordinary harm is a hallmark of many serial offenders. It's not from the monsters in the shadows we should fear. It's the ones who look like everyone else. So the fact that they were doing all these crimes, but then trying to blend into their neighborhood as if they were normal people. And I always go to tell you guys this whenever I talk about these serial killers, is that a lot of them As we go back to even John Wayne Gacy, blended into the community, people thought he was just a normal guy with a construction business. We look at Jeffrey Dahmer. I always talk about him too because he worked at a chocolate factory, appeared like a normal person, and no one knew what he was doing. And so a lot of these, serial killers, they appear like normal people. And that kind of throws everything off a little bit. It just really throws you off. One of the most important aspects of this case is understanding Rose West's role. She wasn't manipulated, she wasn't coerced, she wasn't a bystander. And investigators, psychologists, and survivors all describe Rose as an equal and sometimes dominant partner in the crimes committed inside the West home. She displayed traits associated with antisocial personality disorder, lack of empathy, manipulation, impulsivity, cruelty without remorse. But she also showed traits of narcissism and a need for control. Fred may have initiated the violence, but Rose escalated it. Her ability to present herself as a caring mother, a friendly neighbor, or a supportive partner made her even more dangerous. She weaponized normalcy. So taking a look at this case, this is kind of the sad part about this case, because as it's stated, she was not someone who was forced to do these crimes. She chose to do them. And I think a lot of the reasons she probably did this is because look how she grew up, her childhood. She probably didn't feel loved, didn't feel wanted, wasn't able to express her wants or needs or any type of emotion. So now she's taking out on other innocent people. And so I think this shows a lot of why she did what she did. Could she have chose not to do it? Of course. But of course, psychologically, mentally, she probably was not all the way there. Then you have a grown man who shouldn't even be dealing with you because of your age, and he knows better, but he still takes you in and allows you to do these things. And he even allows himself to be part of this. This is just crazy. This is really a messy case. But it stated for years the West has evaded suspicion, but in the early 1990s, reports of abuse began to surface. Social workers, police, and school officials started asking questions. The turning point came when one of the West children disclosed the abuse happening inside the home. This triggered a deeper investigation, one that eventually led to police searching the property. What they found beneath the house and garden confirmed the worst fears. Again, we won't go into graphic detail, but the discoveries revealed a pattern of long-term organized and deliberate harm. Fred West was arrested. Rose was arrested shortly after, and the facade of the ordinary family collapsed. I am so glad those kids spoke up and said something so they got the help that they needed, because that was just, that's so sad that those kids had to endure that. Thank God somebody stepped in and saved those children. And we also go on to know that Fred West died before he could stand trial, leaving Rose to face the charges alone. During the trial, prosecutors presented evidence of her direct involvement, her leadership role, and her lack of remorse. Psychiatrists who studied Rose described her as highly manipulative, emotionally detached, skilled at deception, motivated by control and dominance. She was convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to life in prison. To this day, Rose West remains one of the few women in the UK to receive a whole life term, meaning she will never be released. So, this is the thing. She had, like, again, they said she had no emotion at all. That's kind of sad for her, no emotion, skilled at being detached, motivated by control and dominance. This is sad. And the worst part about this whole thing is she had to stand the trial by herself because Fred passed away. Isn't it ironic how sometimes the person that does these things with you, somehow they end up getting away with it? I know he didn't purposely probably die, but I'm just saying, like, that's crazy, right? You would think that, you know, they would have been standing together, but I guess that was his punishment, him passing away. But I also want you guys to know it is important to pause here and remember that this story is not about Rose West. It's about the victims, young women and girls whose lives were stolen. Their names, their dreams, their families, and their futures matter far more than the people who harmed them. True crime storytelling must always center the victims, not the perpetrators. Their stories deserve dignity, respect, and remembrance. So let's take a moment of silence for a second to just remember the victims, because again, it is about the victims, not about the people who actually did the crimes. And I want you all to know the West case left a deep scar on the community of Gloucester. Neighbors struggled with guilt, wondering they should have noticed more. Survivors faced years of healing. Families endured unimaginable grief. The house at 25 Cromwell Street was eventually demolished, not to erase history, but to prevent it from becoming a dark tourist attraction. The legacy of this case is a reminder of the importance of listening to victims, taking reports seriously, and recognizing that evil can hide in plain sight. So, This is sad. It shook that community, but I'm glad that they demolished that house. I think that house should not be there, because they're right. It would have attracted so many people trying to see that house. And then it's just for the victims who survived. They don't want to need to walk by that and see that, because that doesn't help them heal. So I think that everything in that was definitely correct. Rose West remains one of the most chilling figures in British criminal history, not because of the details of her crimes, but because of the psychology behind them. Her story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human behavior, trauma, and the capacity of cruelty. But it also reminds us of the resilience of survivors, the importance of community awareness, and the need for systems that protect the vulnerable. Thank you for joining me for tonight's episode of True Crime Chronicles. If you found this episode insightful, consider following the show and leaving a review. It helps more listeners find these stories told with care and respect. Until next time, guys, stay safe, stay aware, and take care of each other.